Hi, everybody, and welcome to Realty Success. I'm Brooke Bryant. I'm a realtor in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the surrounding areas. Also, a co-host of this awesome podcast and the author of The Ultimate Guide for First-Time Home Buyers. Love working with first-time home buyers, but clients of any type. And we're so excited about the show we have today. We're going to talk about some really great things that can help clients, realtors, and just everybody in general across the board. So we're going to have a lot of fun today. And I'm really excited to be joined by my friend, Angela Brown. Angela, how are you today?
I am awesome. Thank you so much for having me here. I appreciate you allowing me to join you guys.
And we're also joined by Aaron Brown, our friend and realtor in Texas. Hey, Aaron.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm a listing specialist out of Central Texas, and I'm super happy to be here today. Really looking forward to it.
Great. And we have an awesome guest with us today who's going to talk with us about negotiations. He is a realtor in New York City. We're so excited to have Eirik Gislason with us. Eirik, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm pleased to be here, and I can't wait for our conversation.
Yeah. So, like I said, you're a realtor in the New York City area. Tell us a little bit about how you got started with that.
Well, I didn't start as a first career in real estate. I moved to New York City from Minnesota, where I grew up, and with the dreams of becoming an actor. I was in musical theater, and I spent about 10 years in New York City doing musical theater regionally, national tours, local theater in New York City. And then I got married and realized that the world was telling me that I needed to progress and do something else and actually make a little money and have a career, a living. So I transitioned, and at that time, I had limited options. I was 10 years out of college, and I would bartended and waited tables a lot. And so, I had a conversation with a couple of friends about real estate. I said, hey, this is something I think I'd be good at. So kind of took that leap and got my license at that time in New York City. It's still, unfortunately, not that difficult to get a license, but at that time it was even easier. I think it was about 45 hours and a couple $100s to get your license. But I took the leap and was happy and was thankful to align myself with a really, really great firm. And I spent 10 years with a firm called Cooper & Cooper Real Estate, going into management and then ultimately becoming their director of sales as that firm grew and became bigger and bigger. Trained all of the agents in both rental and sales training, negotiation training, and did small group and one-on-one coaching. And then after 10 years, I decided to go back into the field as an agent. We were about to have our second daughter, and the life as a sales director is not an easy one. And it's a long day and a long night and weekends as well. And so I decided to go back into the business as an agent and did that. And shortly after doing that, I was introduced to a company called the Real Estate Negotiation Institute. So that was about 7 years ago now. And I took one of their courses on collaborative negotiation. And this is something I'd been training as a sales director for years. But the content was unbelievable. And the way that it was produced, the way that it was created, and the thought leaders they drew from with the content was just really, really fantastic. So I decided to contact the founder and CEO of the company. His name is Tom Heyman. And had a conversation with him, went through training, went to Phoenix for a while and studied the content. And then for the last 7 years, I've been teaching collaborative negotiation tactics and techniques on both the core concept level and the master level for real estate professionals across the United States. And it's so eye-opening, the idea of collaborative negotiation, and so incredibly important especially in today's real estate market.
For those of us that are just new to the collaborative negotiation concept, can you break down for us real quick just what that is and kind of what's involved?
Yeah. As cliche as it sounds, collaborative negotiation is that idea of a win-win negotiation. And the way that we break that down and the way that we define that a little bit more specifically is I want to maximize the gain for my side. I want to get as much as I possibly can for my side of the table, for my client, while adequately satisfying the other side and minimally or marginally satisfying any related third parties. So I am there to make sure that by adequately satisfying the other side, I reduce the risk of retribution, of entrenchment, of clawback, of all of these things that happen in subsequent negotiations in real estate. I'm there to get as much value as I possibly can while letting the other side feel that small win. And then, of course, the related third parties are all of the people who have an interest in the deal. Uncle Fred, the mortgage professional, the title rep, the attorneys, all of these people who have an interest and have a voice in the deal, making sure that they're minimally or marginally satisfied so that we can get the transaction done.
That's a great approach to the negotiation as it pertains to real estate, because there are so many people who are involved in the transaction. So in addition to you becoming a master in this yourself, you've also become a coach in this. So you coach the real estate professionals on your team.
Yeah, so I have a team called the Excelsior team at Brown Harris Stevens. I'm still a full-time working real estate professional at Brown Harris Stevens in Manhattan. So I have my own team. So yes, I do coach my team, but also what happened as I started progressing and becoming more popular as a negotiation instructor in New York City and in the surrounding area, is that I'd have agents who would come to me after the courses wanting some more coaching, wanting some more development. And the thing that's interesting is we use the value proposition as kind of the jumping off point, right? What are we bringing to the table as an agent? What are the benefits that we offer? How do we understand the benefits that we offer and convey them in a concise and clear manner to the different types of decision makers that are out there, right? So there's that complex idea of how to establish a really positive and clear value proposition. So using that as the jumping off point, I started Archway Partners, my real estate coaching company, about 18 months ago. And, just helping real estate agents find what exactly are they interested in achieving? What are their motivations? What are their values? Not everybody has the same idea of what achievement means in real estate. And I think that a lot of times real estate coaches make the mistake of painting everyone with the same with the same paintbrush, with the broad brush stroke. And my idea is more of let's understand what your values are, who you are, and then bring those to the table so that we can, help you create a path that's going to allow you to be as successful as you want to be.
In the negotiation process, how do you determine who is the winner? Like, I know that everybody comes in with something. How do you determine, okay, we've met those goals?
That's a great question. There are several sources of power that we talk about in negotiation, and one of them comes from the Wharton School of Business, and they talk about planning being your most important source of power. And what that means is having minimums, maximums, and goals, being very specific about those minimums and maximums. And then if you're going to change your goal, if you're going to alter that, you're going into a highest and best, or you're starting to look in a different neighborhood or subdivision, if those goals change, then you're very specific, or you're very intentional about how you change those goals. So how you decide whether you win is really about what we call persuasion, and that idea of setting expectations and having that goal setting conversation with your client so that they can understand what it is to win. Because really the win is relative, right? As I said, my job or my goal is to get as much value for my client as I can. It's not, it's not split the pie 50-50. It's not, as I like to say in my classes, it's not holding hands by the fire and swaying back and forth singing Kumbaya, right? That's not what collaborative negotiation is. I'm going to be a fierce advocate for my client. I'm going to be cooperative. And my goal is to identify relative value elements, right? What's important to my client? What do they want? What does the other side want? And how do they rank their value elements? And the more ceaselessly curious I can be, the better I am at asking questions, I can get that information from the other side. What's of value to them? And then I can integrate their interests into the overall package by going, well, they value this, we value that. Let's find a way to exchange items of value so that we give away things of lesser value to us that are of more value to them in exchange for things that are of more value to us that may be of less value to them. We could package up a couple of things and do a trade that way. But in doing that, we actually make the pie bigger. And that's the whole point of collaborative negotiation, is actually expanding that pie, putting more value into the pie, as opposed to thinking of that fixed pie where I got to get 51% or more. If I do that, I win and the other side loses. There's more to it than that. If you build that bigger pie, that's why you can let the other side have that smaller win while you're getting more and more value by identifying those exchanges.
And as you're setting up a deal, for example, do you put those, I'm going to call them pot sweeteners, do you put those on the table and say, okay, if we have to, give a little bit more, here's what we're going to give, so that in advance that everybody's on the same place, like, hey, this is what we agreed on, we can add?
Yeah, it depends on the value element. And in many cases, we talk about promote and protect in the NAR Code of Ethics, the RENI Code of Ethics, which is what we have here in New York City. But that idea of promote and protect, sometimes you want to promote information. You want to give the other side some information that is actually going to add to your power on your side, right? Things about your client or things that you may be willing to exchange or trade. You may want to promote some things, but there are also things that you really need to protect, whether it's for the entire deal, so that they don't know exactly what your motivation is, or they don't know what you're exactly willing to do. But you may take some of those items as well and put them on the table in counter offer number 1 or counter offer number 2. So when I do role playing with my coaching students or with my negotiation courses, that's oftentimes what we'll talk about is, let's rank the value elements. Let's come up with, identify some things that we see as possible trades or exchanges. Then we have to get strategic about which ones are we going to put on the table at the beginning of the negotiation, which of them are we going to hold back, so that when we get that counteroffer, and we're trying to play chess and say, well, if we do this, we think that they're going to do that, if then, right? And we put that on the table. Hopefully they come back, and then we can with a counteroffer that allows us to then input that next value element on the table and kind of work around the other side to make sure that we're getting more of what we want. And whether that's down payment, whether that's personal property, whether that's a contingency, there are several things that we can hold back for subsequent counteroffers that will sweeten the deal.
I love that approach, because very often when you're involved, when you're in the middle of a real estate transaction, there's so much emotion involved.
Yeah.
And so when you have this role playing, when you train your agents to do that, then they can go into it in a more pragmatic way and not get swept up in the emotions. That they've practiced this, they have scripts, they have strategies and skill sets that they can kind of mitigate some of those emotions.
I totally agree. I'm a big fan of role playing. I'm a big fan of, we oftentimes I'll use the term at bats. I love imagery, I love metaphor and analogies, but at bats, there are agents out there who have the ability to go on 4 listing presentations a week, or have that benefit, or have 4 or 5 buyer consultations a week. But then there are others that are trying to work toward that kind of level of at bats, or that level of opportunity. But that idea of having the opportunity doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually going to be successful in winning that listing, or working with that buyer. So having a buyer representation agreement signed with that buyer, right? So how, especially in this market, as transactions are down significantly, how do we increase our winning percentage, right? When I go into a listing presentation, instead of winning every other pitch, or instead of winning 3 out of 5, it's really important that I win them all. And the only way that you're going to do that is by role playing and finding a way to, as you mentioned, Brooke, having those conversations in advance with a colleague, with a partner, whatever it is, so that you can get some of that emotional stuff out of there, so that you can focus on what's important to the client, that you can kind of review the tape, so to speak, and say, what could I have done differently that would have allowed us to pivot to this conversation rather than pivoting toward, what my commission was going to be, so to speak. What could I have done differently so that I could have established a value proposition where price became irrelevant, which is what we want, right? As in a little listing presentation, when I establish a value proposition, I want my seller to two things. I want them, one, to go, okay, he's worth every penny that he's asking for. So I don't even have to deal with the objection of a commission, a cut in commission. But then the other thing I'm looking for is what behavioral scientists call satisficing, right? And I love this term. It's that idea that human beings are not looking to analyze every situation to its fullest. We don't have to go through 10 different real estate professionals or 5 different real estate professionals in order to make a decision. If the second one through the door is satisfactory and sufficient, I'm ready to go. So if I can display that in a professional way to a seller, where it's like, close the book, give me your contract so that I can sign that and we can move forward. We misperceive that, I think, as real estate professionals a lot. We're like, well, they're going to go see 5 agents or 3 agents or 4 agents, and then they're going to review all of the details. They're going to weigh them against each other. The reality is, if you ask most people, they're looking for somebody to walk out that door where they can turn to each other and go, yeah, that's it. That's the one. That's the agent. And then they're done.
Now, you just mentioned a minute ago how you were paying attention to things that went right and things that you could improve on in every negotiation. And I'm curious to know, how do you take what you've learned and turn that into a new benchmark?
That's a great question. I think that oftentimes when you do internalize your negotiation, or, when we look at role playing or look at case studies in my courses, I'm very fond of saying, look, we all have to have grace and understanding that it's very easy to play Monday morning quarterback, or that, the hindsight is 2020, whatever the imagery is, but it's very easy to do that. What we want to do when we revisit it is we don't want to be too hard on ourselves. We don't want to make anybody feel badly about the way that they could have done things. It's really about looking at things so that you can pick out the things that you can learn from. And a lot of times what I find is there are specific things that somebody may find that they could have done better. One is showing your work. And in this market, it is so incredibly important that we as real estate professionals convey to our clients what it is that we do in order to try to achieve the best outcome for them that we can. There's tons of studies that show that clients we're underwater when it comes to satisfaction ratings on agents getting the best price and terms for their client, whether you're talking to sellers or whether you're talking to buyers, right? A lot of buyers and sellers will say, well, I don't think that they got the best price or the best terms. They could have done better, right? Or they ended up in a highest and best and they're 10% above the asking price. And they think, well, obviously, I think we could have done better than that, right? When the reality is that oftentimes just showing your work, explaining along the way to your client exactly what you did, the conversations you had, your negotiation style, the questions you asked, the information you gathered, and putting them in a place where paying 10% above the ask is the best way for them to get that property. Or if you're on the sell side, 4% below the asking price is the best possible deal we could have gotten. And oftentimes that's what our clients need. They need us to bring them along, to collaborate with them, to share with them what we're doing and why. And the agents that don't do that just kind of show up with an outcome. The client, it makes sense. The client looks back and goes, well, could this have gone better for me? Did we overpay? And so oftentimes sharing your work is, I think, one of the things that agents, when they review and say, how could I have done things differently? That's one. And then another one falls back on the emotional piece, right? We talk about the SAM triangle, which comes from, I don't know if you've ever read Getting to Yes by Roger Fisher and William Ury, who are from the Harvard program, like the godfathers of collaborative negotiation, essentially. But they talk about the SAM model, this idea that we all take stands, right? We all take these positions to guard ourselves from being swayed too far in one direction or the other. It's a common, natural thing that we as human beings do. What we want to try to do as skilled negotiators is understand the area of concern, that's the A, and the emotional motivators, that's the M. So that's the SAM triangle: stand, area of concern, emotional motivators. And when you actually can get to that area of concern, you're going to be far more persuasive in finding a successful outcome or giving your clients options to choose from. So when we're dealing with that emotional side of things, and we take a left turn or a wrong turn when we really should have been more empathetic, acknowledge our client's difficulty, if it's a price drop or something like that, or if you're, you have a buyer who thinks they're in a buyer's market, but yet they keep getting beat out in best and highest after best and highest. And they're like, what is happening? I'm supposed to be in a buyer's market right now. I got interest rates going through the roof. I can't catch a break. And part of that is acknowledging them, understanding their area of concern, being as empathetic as you possibly can. And sometimes when we're frustrated, or when we feel that we're personally getting too personally involved, or we're personally attacked, or they didn't follow our advice, and I feel really personally hurt by that. When we get into that realm, then a lot of things can go wrong.
Well, you mentioned showing your work, and you do a lot of work in doing these role play scenarios with your agents. And do you think it's beneficial to do that with your clients too? Show the work beforehand, like, okay, this is the market we're in right now. Here's what you can expect. So let's go into this transaction. We think we're probably going to get multiple offers. Here's how that's going to look. I think how we should, let's talk about how we want to play that out. Or you're a buyer and you're probably going to be competing with multiple offers. So show your work before it actually, here's our strategy. Here's our plan of attack going into this.
Yeah, 100%. And doing that in advance. And I like to, instead of using the term, as I sometimes fall into, setting expectations, I like to use the term sharing expectations, because what you do when you do that, to your point, Brooke, when you're at the beginning of the transaction, there are several benefits to having that role play or that if-then kind of conversation with your client. One is, when it happens, when they're frustrated because they lost out on a highest and best, or when that highest and best comes around and they're on the listing side, they're the seller. When the things happen that you've talked about prior, now you've already had a conversation. They already feel like they're prepared for that. They're going to be a little bit more resilient in that conversation. They're going to feel more powerful, because when you have that if-then conversation with them and you're walking through, if this happens, then you've already kind of empowered them. If we lose a highest and best, right? If we go to a highest and best, it is possible that the seller is going to be looking for something other than what we can provide. What we will do is we will make sure that we go right up to that indifference point, or that walk away point, right? Where we decided that plan A is no longer plan A, and it's better to go with plan B. And that's where we talk about the idea of BATNA, which also comes from the Harvard program, the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. And they think that's your strongest source of power. That's what they say is your strongest source of power, because the stronger that plan B is, the more clear you're going to be on when you're going to walk away from that deal. And if you have that, so if you have that persuasion, or you have that sharing of expectations, and you go into that highest and best, and it gets to the point where they've got 4 all cash offers, and the listing agent's already told you they're tens of thousands of dollars above the asking price, and you sit down with your client and they've come up with that indifference point, or that walk away point of, let's say it's $950,000, and that the highest and best is already beyond that benchmark. Now your client can look at it and say, we chose 950 because at 951, plan B is better than plan A. So now we're beyond 950. I think it's time for us to exercise our BATNA. And now you're leaving that negotiation from a position of strength. You are no longer getting beat out by other buyers. You're no longer losing. You're no longer failing. You're saying, this is what we were willing to do. The negotiation has gone beyond what doesn't meet our minimum goals anymore. Now it's time for us to move on to plan B. And there's strength in that. So that's one benefit. The other benefit is that you show your competency, right? I mean, Stephen M. R. Covey from Speed of Trust, he talks about the 2 dimensions of trust: character and competency. And competency is incredibly important, as is character is obviously important as well. But when you sit down and have that conversation, Brooke, with a client about, if we go to a highest and best, then, and you walk down that road with them, it shows that you've been there before. It shows that you have experience, that you have results. And when you convey that level of confidence and comfort in your client, the trust level just shoots through the roof. So there's so many benefits to having those conversations with your client as well.
And a flip side of that, and I'm from the cleaning end of the move in, move out cleaning side of real estate. But one of the things I found, speaking right about what Eirik is saying, is when we create expectations and we plant seeds, the seeds we plant are the seeds that we harvest. And so when we're, for example, speaking to a customer, we have a worksheet that we use. And so in order to show our work, we say, here's what's going to happen. Your spouse is going to get home today and say, what? You've hired a house cleaner? And here's what you're going to say. And we walk them through the whole checklist and say, our house cleaner is going to do all of these things 26 times this year. Imagine how much time that's going to give me back here at the house. And I said, then your neighbor, while you're out walking and talking, one of these days, your neighbor is going to ask you the question, who do you have as a house cleaner? And you're going to come running inside the house and you're going to get this checklist and you're going to take it out and give it to them, because it has all of our contact information at the top and it has a list of everything we do. On the back page here, it has all of our rules and regulations and how to work with us. So you don't even have to go through the whole spiel and tell all your neighbors. You just give them this sheet. And what you're doing is planting all these seeds. Well, not only does it show your competence, but what it shows is exactly how to market your business. Because what we present to our clients is how they present our message, either to the spouse or to their real estate agent or to their lender or their banker or whomever it is that they have to justify this deal to. And so when we set really clear expectations, it's not just that we're showing our personal power and we're showing our process, but what we're doing is we're actually training them to expand our message, which is where all of our ratings and referrals come from. And we make it so easy because if they can understand it, and we have a rule at our business, 5th grade education. And I say that because a lot of people who work in the house cleaning industry maybe they're not, English is not their first language. And so our goal is to keep it really simple, because even really super smart people understand really simple. Mm-hmm. And so by keeping it really simple, anyone can turn around at the school bus stop. And I say the school bus stop because I just planted that seed. So at the school bus stop, when all the parents are there and they're talking about, oh, your house cleaner's coming today. Oh, I wish I had a good house cleaner. You're going to tell the other moms and the other dads that are there at the school bus stop waiting for their kids, for the school bus to come. You're going to run in the house and get that for them. And so now we've just planted these other seeds, but we make it so easy that then everybody on the page, like what Eirik was saying, is able to understand, here's what's coming next. And when they know it's coming next, when it starts coming, they're going to go, wait, I know, I heard about this. I know what to do now. And now they go do exactly what you just trained them to do.
Well, and that's so important for us in the real estate profession because we rely so much on those referrals, and and working well with other we're going to have other realtors that if we were in a great transaction with, they may have a transaction that they can't do. They're going to refer it to us, or we have a successful negotiation transaction with our clients, they're going to refer us to someone else. So it's the same thing in real estate. Those referrals are our lifeblood. They're our lifeline. Yeah,
100%. That's great. I love that. I love the sharing of expectations and the subtle training. And Brooke, you're right. I mean, this is the life cycle. This is what we also teach in negotiation and collaborative negotiation is, if you're a competitive negotiator, you're far more transactional. And that's one of the, there are competitive tactics that I use as a collaborative negotiator. It's not to say that there aren't competitive tactics that are useful in a time and place, right? With my client's permission, I will use a competitive tactic if necessary and if I think it's right to do. So I'm not opposed to competitive tactics as a collaborative negotiator, but it's not where I start. And if you have a competitive negotiator, oftentimes it's what they know. It's all they know are hard bargaining, intimidation tactics, that idea of gaslighting and putting someone back and trying to intimidate people. And what happens with a competitive negotiator is, as good as they may feel in that individual single negotiation, it's incredibly transactional. It's transactional in the business of real estate with the co-brokers that you're going to see over and over and over again. And it's transactional with the clientele that you're working with. And so when we talk about collaborative negotiation, we oftentimes talk about that, the cyclical nature, the life cycle of a real estate transaction. And as soon as you get back done around the corner, now you're back up in testimonial, repeat client, referral, right? And then you're back into that real estate side, that cycle again as a collaborative negotiator. And it's so much easier to do it when you have that collaborative mindset.
Well,
so my question for you,
no, go ahead, Angela, go ahead.
Well, my question for you is, how do you approach a deal when you go in with a collaborative mindset and then the person that you're working with maybe doesn't have that collaboration mindset and they're not participating in whatever it is you're doing?
Yeah, well, that happens quite a bit. And as you can imagine, in New York, it happens probably here more than even in some other places. I imagine there are competitive negotiators everywhere, but it's not uncommon here. And what's important is Richard Schell, he's from the Wharton School, another great negotiation instructor and author. He wrote a book called Bargaining for Advantage, which is amazing. But he says you got to take a moment at the beginning of the negotiation to size up your counterpart and see what style they're bringing to the table. This is also for your own client, right? Before we negotiate with the other side, we negotiate with our clients. Sometimes our clients are really competitive. So whether it's our client or the other side of the table, if we notice that they're very competitive, we're not going to change their style of negotiation. That's what we know. We're not going to take a competitive negotiator and make them a collaborative negotiator. But you can use their specific persuasive tools or persuasion principles, as we call them, that you can use on competitive negotiators that are more effective than others. One is the self-interest principle, right? The self-interest principle says, first of all, people do what is in their own interest. It's natural for us as human beings to do what is going to serve our interests. So how do you convey something to the other side in a way that is serving their interests rather than serving your own? So when you want to have a phone conversation, it's not, hey, you owe me a phone call. It's, I've got something really exciting to share with you. Give me a call, right? Is something that's going to serve them rather than serve you. They don't care about whether they owe you a phone call or whether you were expecting a call from them 30 minutes ago. They find power in withholding information. They find power in using those hard bargaining tactics and making you kind of chase them, right? Mm-hmm. So instead, make it appeal to them. Give them something that serves their self-interest. The other one is the uniqueness principle, or as is sometimes called the scarcity principle, right? Things that are scarce or unique are inherently more valuable. So you offer that competitive negotiator something that seems scarce or unique, whether it's scarcity of time, whether it's scarcity of price, something that gives them an idea that they're doing something special or that they can offer to their client that is something special, is going to appeal to them. And then the last one is sound logic, which is a lot of your competitive negotiators are type A, data-driven, they're assertive drivers, or they're analytic thinkers, and they are people who like data. They're very good with data. So sometimes taking them away from that kind of like telling you how it's going to be, you remove that subjective side of the negotiation. You go right down to the objective data of the deal. And you say, can we agree that the data is going to drive the price? Or can we agree that data matters more than anything else in this deal, right? Get their compliance and then go at them with data. So, the first thing you want to do is just make sure you know who they are. If you're dealing with a competitive negotiator, knowing who they are is important. And then there's a series of tactics that you'll find that they use very commonly. It's really kind of interesting. When I first started studying this, I teach a class on 38 tactics, right? competitive, collaborative, and then some that are a combination of both. But in my core concepts class, we just deal with like the 12 top competitive tactics that you find, like the nibble tactic or the child tactic, good cop, bad cop, silence, walk away, those types of things. The red herring. So we talk about those. So what's funny is once I started really getting into the study of collaborative and competitive negotiation, all of a sudden you start seeing them so much more clearly. And as the Harvard idea behind dealing with competitive tactics, they have a phrase called name it to tame it. And when you can identify it and go, oh, they're using a red herring tactic, and you go, okay, I know what you're doing. I see what you're doing. And you point it out to them. Like I said, you're not going to change the competitive negotiator's style, but when they realize something's not working, they run right to the next tactic and they start using something else, right? And as you keep naming it to tame it, they start to see that you're not going to be like all of these other people who kind of bent to their will. And that's how competitive negotiators are used to dealing. People will give them what they want. And so they keep doing what they're doing. And it's not skill-based. It's what they're taught. It's what they know.
So you will actually say, oh, I see what you're doing there, and call out there. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. It's really effective. It's really effective. And like one of them that I highlight frequently is the good cop, bad cop, because we see it often, or good guy, bad guy, as we call it. Right. So you'll be dealing, let's say you're dealing with the good guy where they're being collaborative, they're being friendly, and there's some sort of impasse in the deal. And that's when the bad guy shows up, right? That the whole idea behind the detective in the 1930s movie, and they kick over the chair and they come in and they start grilling you, right? So that's the whole idea. The reason that the bad guy is there is because the good guy wasn't getting it done. There's a contrast. They want to throw in some contrast to try to throw you back and knock you on your heels. And if you can just name that tactic, if you could say, wow, this is amazing. You're the good guy. You're the bad guy. I saw the good guy. So you're the bad guy. And then you name it. And then you say to them, here's the deal. If you want to be the lead negotiator, that's fine. And that's the second part of just name it to tame it. And then it's just, I will not be intimidated. It's just a tactic. So you say, if you want to be the lead negotiator on this deal, that's absolutely fine. But what you need to do is first get caught up on all the conversations that Greg and I have been having, right? So he and I have been dealing with this negotiation for 7 days. So allow me to catch you up. And then what I need to know is that you're going to be the lead negotiator moving on from here. Can we agree on that? And the reality is the bad guy, the bad cop, they don't want to take over. They want to come in, brush you back very quickly and move on. And so when you make them commit to the deal and you call them out on the tactic, it completely diffuses them. And they're like, how do I get out of this as quickly as I possibly can? And
we've spent 611 hours on this technique and this particular deal. Can I catch you up on 611 hours?
Yeah, exactly.
They're going to go, let me check. No, that's not going to happen. I don't want it that bad.
I've got pages of notes that I'm going to send you, and then we'll talk about
this much. Yeah,
exactly.
Well, as you mentioned, here in New York City, I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and work a lot like in the suburbs. And I'm not an aggressive person at all. And we've had a lot of people move from the Northeast here, and they expect that sort of aggression and that, and I'm like, look, that's not the personality you're going to get from me. I will, I have a great skill set. I can get you through it, but that's not me. But I can work with any other kind of realtor. But it can be really intimidating working with some of those personality types that you mentioned. And it's so important to understand. I love what you said. I'm not going to be intimidated. It's just a tactic. That's something great to have in your toolbox.
And Brooke, if you want to deal with the next type A banker that comes down to Charlotte that you have to deal with from New York City, and they come in, bull in a china shop and want you to start throwing people around so that they can get the best deal possible. Oftentimes, and this happens in New York too. I'm very assertive. I am not going to be unless I need to be, I am not going to pull out these competitive tactics because it's not in my client's interest for me to do it. So when I have those clients, I'll sit down with them and I'll say, I completely understand where you're coming from. I want to acknowledge them. I understand where you're coming from. I know what it is that you want. And I am going to be as assertive and I'm going to be a fierce advocate for your interests. But here's what I can tell you. And this is what you can say to them as they come down to Charlotte. Here in Charlotte, the way that you are attempting to, or that you want me to behave in this market, is not going to serve your interests. So they don't care that you want to be a collaborative negotiator. They don't care that it's not your style. What they care about is how they get the most they can possibly get. And when you tell them, you're not going to get the most you can possibly get by throwing people around like a bull in a china shop. It works differently down here. And I'm very skilled at what I do. I have incredible connections here and I have a tremendous success rate. But here, things work a little bit differently. Here, in order for you to get the most that you possibly can get, you're going to have to deal with the style that I bring to the table, right? And this is how I do it, and then you can show your work along the way, right? So they as long as they know that you're going to get them the most, that's all they care about.
I love that.
My husband is in lending. He's in the banker side of finance. And on his day off, he had that exact same conversation with someone from another area. He said, we're going to put a halt on this deal. And he said, we're going to give it about 24 hours to percolate. And he kept having the conversation. He said, you need to know that in this market, he said, this is the good old boys network. We're in the South. And he said, the person that's going to bring us the check he's not going to wire the money. He's going to get in his pickup truck and he's going to drive it over here after he's had his grits and his sausage biscuit. And he said, we have to wait for that to happen. And he said, because when the guy shows up, the guy's going to show up literally with cash in hand. And he said, so we got to if we're going to make this deal happen, we've got to make sure that it's in his time, not our time. And I appreciated listening to that because he's like, he understands his audience enough. He understands his buyer enough that he knows that if he rushes this deal, he's going to lose it.
Right.
And to hear my husband explain that on the phone, I was like, that's why they call him the Velvet Hammer.
I love it. Oh, I wish I had a nickname like that. Oh.
Yeah, he's very, very good at what he does, but you would never know it by talking to him because he's so low key and he's so just like even keel, but he closes every deal and he just knocks them down. And then he has like these little celebrations like, I did it. But like to his clients and customers, he's just.
So can you talk to us? I know one of the techniques that you advocate, Eirik, is the importance of listening, active listening. Mm-hmm. Can you, and that speaks a lot to what Angela just said. Can you talk with us about that a little?
Yeah. The idea of active listening is, and you add to that the idea of empathy, empathetic listening, right? It is the idea of really allowing yourself or teaching yourself, conditioning yourself to allow someone to get through their entire message, their entire thought. Because in that thought, there's so much richness in the second, third, fourth, fifth sentence that they're going to say or they're going to convey. It's not, and we oftentimes will just cut someone off after one sentence because we liked or didn't like what they said. We jump in either to agree with them, which derails them, or we jump in to contradict them or to say, no, that's not right, right? So we oftentimes don't let someone get through their entire thought and just keep our mouths closed while we give them that space. That's one part of active listening. But then there's that strategic empathy part, right? That idea of really being deferential and understanding that the other person is giving you something, whether it's time or information. And when you understand that every conversation that you have is setting up the next conversation you have, right? I have an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, and we talk to them about this concept, right? Because kids, they have a thought, they want to jump in. And in a subtle way, we want age appropriate kind of conversations with them, right? It's age appropriate for them to have these impulses. But we also want to help them understand what it means to be an active and empathetic listener so that the next time that they're speaking, the person that they're speaking to will give them the same courtesy that they gave you, right? And that reciprocity, that's the whole exchange idea, right? That's in us. It's in all of us, that reciprocity. So when we give that active listening to the other person, not only do we gain a lot more information, but we create a trusting relationship with them. And being able to be comfortable with silence, being able to be comfortable letting someone continue and finish their thought, there's a lot of power in that, and there's a lot of gold. There's a lot of information that can be derived from just being an empathetic listener. And there's another, from Bargaining for Advantage, I mentioned G. Richard Schell. They've done studies on skilled negotiators and what they did well in a negotiation. And, the studies show that the skilled collaborative negotiators spent almost one fifth of their entire negotiation just using active listening skills and testing for understanding and summarizing information, right? Just listening and being empathetic and summarizing back and saying, did I hear you correctly when you said, right? All of those things that are so important in information gathering.
That's great. And you also stress the importance of asking really good, effective questions.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really important in all aspects of real estate, learning what our clients' wants and needs are, and then also the other players in the transactions. So what tips can you give us about cultivating some good, effective questions?
Well, I call it ceaseless curiosity. I think I might have said it earlier in the podcast, but I love that. That's what I call this idea of kind of bringing out your inner 7-year-old when it comes to asking questions. And studies have shown that 7, 8-year-old kids are the best negotiators. And one of the reasons is because they don't ask questions with the outcome in mind. And we as we get older as adults, we start to kind of, we already have in our mind what the answer to the question is going to be. We play worst case scenario out in our brain, right? So we think about, should I ask this question? Am I being too intrusive? How are they going to respond? What if they think it's offensive, right? And we start to play the outcome in our brain before we've even asked the question. And we convince ourselves to ask one question where probably we should have asked 4 or 5. And that's where kids are so amazing, right? Not only will they ask the same question over and over, why, right? But they'll ask questions in so many different ways because they're not concerned with the outcome. Their brains aren't thinking about, like, what if my parent, like, grounds me for 3 weeks. It's not even in their brain, right? They want a second snack and they're going to go after it, right? They know who has the information they want. They know who has the value that they want, and they go after it with several different questions. So part of that is that ceaseless curiosity and getting that inner child back in us, where we're just curious, not thinking about the intrusiveness of our questions, thinking of our questions as just being curious. I want to uncover as much information as I can. And when we can convey our questions as, like, if we can couch our questions in a way that says to the other side, I'm asking these questions so that I can create as much possible value in this scenario that I can, right? Whether I'm talking to my spouse or my child or a negotiator on the other side or my boss or my father, if I can come to them and say, look, I'm sorry, I know I'm asking a lot of questions, but this is really fascinating to me. And I'm only asking questions so that I can gather as much information as I can to get as much value out of this conversation as I can, right? And so all of a sudden my questions are come more from curiosity than from intrusion or from some sort of, like, trying to get one over on them or trying to pull the wool over their eyes or whatever that may be, right? I'm not trying to be their adversary. I'm just being curious. And so just that idea of ceaseless curiosity is a big one. But then when you delve deep into strategic questioning, what I find, and I'm shocked when I teach my negotiation courses, how it comes over and over and over again, not only with agents who are fairly new to the business, but agents who have been in the business for decades. They ask a lot of closed-ended questions. And what happens is psychologically, we ask closed-ended questions because we kind of want to give the other person an easy out. We don't think about it that way. But instead of asking how and what questions, like what would your client say if we came in with an offer below 900,000? Would your client freak out if we came in with a number less than 900,000? Right? We close the question off, and we pretty much, in many cases, we allow for only one rational answer from the other side. Right? If I ask that question, will your client freak out if we come in with an offer below 900,000? They either are going to give away all the power that they have by saying, no, yeah, come in, whatever you want, with 800, 700, just throw a number in there, right? They either are going to do that, or they're going to do what they're conditioned to do, or what their body tells them to, and say, absolutely, you come with a number with under 900,000, my client is going to freak out, right? You give them one path to go down. Whereas if you say, how will your client respond? Or help me understand what your client would do if, right? And you give them the ability to answer the question with prose, with a longer form answer than just the yes or no. So as much as we can as agents, Chris Voss talks about this, the why questions, that we're trying to get to the why, but we do it by asking what and how questions. The more we can put a what and a how at the front of our sentences, rather than a will you or would you, something that closes it off into a yes or no, the more information we're going to get. And that goes right back to information gathering and everything that makes a skilled collaborative negotiator so skilled. I want, compliance questions are good. I might ask my client, is this the best house we've seen so far? Yes. That's a yes, no, right? Of all the houses we've seen today, would you say that this is far and away the best? Yes, I'm looking for those compliance questions, right? And then I might say, tell me what you like about it. I'm not going to say, did you like the kitchen? Did you like the view? Hey, what'd you think of the garage, right? I'm going to ask them questions that allow them to, I'm going to get the compliance, and then I'm going to open it up for them to just tell me information, to give me information. And that I think is focusing on that as a negotiator can be very, very fruitful. And then the last one I'll point out is the hypothetical questions, the speculative questions that take what you're asking them out of the realm of the real and into the hypothetical, where you say, what if I were to ask you? Or what if my client were to? Or suppose you had a buyer who offered X, right? If you're asking what if or suppose questions, oftentimes that is just enough for that other person to get real with you, because you're not directly making it a question that's based in the reality of the deal that you're negotiating. And that can be a very good tactic as well.
You've obviously done a lot of studies and read a lot of books and done a lot of training. My curious question to you now is, how do you evaluate a good negotiation technique?
Ooh, that's a great question. How do you evaluate whether a technique is a good one?
How do you evaluate a good negotiation technique?
I would
say,
say,
how do you know if it works for you?
Yeah, I would say that. Are you saying one that I'm using, or one that I'm evaluating from one of my coaching?
So let's say that you're reading a book. You could be listening to a Kwame Christian podcast or whatever it is on negotiation, and all of a sudden you're like, "Whoa, that is a great idea! I'm going to use that." Like, how do you discover a new technique that you're like, "That is rock solid"?
Yeah. Oftentimes for me, when I learn something, a new tactic or technique that I'm like, wow, this is really, really amazing. And I'll tell you one that I recently heard that I've implemented, and it's beautiful. How I evaluate it is, how will it make my client feel? How will it educate my client, right? If I'm looking to bridge any sort of knowledge gap, and there's something that'll help them understand in a different way a concept, if that's the way that I see it, then that I'll evaluate that as a very, very successful technique or tactic. And then also, it's, who am I? I teach this class. I designed this class for Archway Partners called the Decision Makers, and it's all about looking at 4 different decision maker types. Right? I mentioned the assertive driver, the collaborative feeler, the expressive humanist, and the analytic thinker. And looking at those different decision maker types, they are all very different from each other in how they evaluate information that you provide them and the way that you provide information. So I sometimes will look at a tactic or a technique that someone mentions to me or that I learn, and I'll go, oh, this would be perfect for the assertive driver. Oh, this would really, really land with the collaborative feeler, right? So sometimes I look at it and you have to specify like who it may be right for. Mm-hmm. And one of the example I was going to give you is I heard from, I don't know where I heard this. I think it was from a podcast, but I heard somebody describe how they convey to their competitive clients. So an assertive driver would be a perfect person for this, how they convey where they should be priced. And instead of going to them and going, here's the low, low, middle, high kind of idea of, this is where I would recommend, this is right in line with the market, this is more of an aggressive position, this is more of an aspirational position. They conveyed it to them like a race, whether it's a horse race, a foot race, a car race. And they said, let's look at the comp data. So they bring out the comp data, and then they have basically a like little like chess pieces or little pieces, like game pieces. And they say, if we price at 945,000 in this market, this is where we'll be, third place. If we price at 920,000 in this market, we're in second place. At 910, we are in the pole position. We're in first place, right? So if we're looking at the different pricing strategies, let's look at where we land relative to the competition that's on the market right now. And competitive people want to win. Mm-hmm. So it helps them reframe their contrast between getting the best possible price as opposed to putting themselves in a position to win, to have the best possible chance to win. And when you do that with someone who's assertive and you go, if you price here, you're going to be in first place. What does that mean? That means that everybody looking for properties in our neighborhood is going to see us as the best possible option. Now, does that mean that we're going to get multiple offers? Does that mean that we're going to go to a highest and best? Yet to be determined. But I do know if we price at the middle range or if we price at the high range, we are going to have 3 properties in front of us that are likely to sell before we see our first offer. Or if we do get an offer, it's going to be in relation, or they're going to give us an offer that is competitive with the people that are in pole position and second position. They're actually going to give us an offer that's competitive with those other apartments or other houses because that's the best option at that price point. They have a great BATNA. The great BATNA is the house that's priced at $910,000. We're at $935,000, and we're the same exact property essentially. So when they come to us, they're either going to give us an offer that's below that 910 mark, or they're going to negotiate to a point where they can exercise their BATNA and go after that property. If that property sells, hey, look, we move up in position. So if we have time, if you're not in a hurry, maybe we're comfortable being in third place. Maybe we're comfortable being in second place. If we have time on our side, maybe we start there. But at what point do we decide that we want to get into pole position or that we want to get into first place? And having that tactic or that technique of walking through a race kind of scenario or metaphor is I love it. And it's worked with several of my clients over the past several months. It's really, really cool.
Well, it's terribly easy to see why you have achieved such success in real estate. And I have learned so much from you today and can't wait to go to your website and learn more. Would you please share with our audience where they can find you so that they can learn more about your incredible negotiation techniques?
Absolutely. So my coaching website is Archway Partners Inc. So archwaypartnersinc.com. And there you can sign up for a 30-minute consultation. I can give you a free value proposition guide, which is an amazing tool. So find me there. If you want to follow me on socials, on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, I do a lot of short form videos where I just give I'll take one aspect of negotiation and I'll do a 1 minute or a 1.5 minute little breakdown, give you tips and tricks on how to deal with a price adjustment or things like that. And all of those socials are at Eirik the Expert. And my name, Eirik, is, as you can see here, it's got 2 I's. It's a nice, strange Icelandic name. So it's EIRIK, the Expert. And follow me there on socials, and you'll find me.
I'm already following you and already learning so much. And thank you so much for sharing all of that information. Angela, would you please tell everybody where they can find you?
Yes, thank you. I'm Angela Brown. I'm the CEO of Savvy Cleaner, and you can find me on all of the socials at Ask Angela Brown.
Great. And Aaron, anybody who needs a negotiation specialist in San Antonio, where can they find you?
You can find me on any social media at Ask Aaron Brown.
And I'm Brooke Bryant. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the surrounding areas. It's a great topic today. Loved learning so much about negotiations, and I'm going to go do some reading. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thank you so much. Really
Thank you
appreciate
all.
it.
Bye.
Bye-bye.